was working for Black Girls Code, and we noticed a lot of issues that the students were having. And so I had to spend a lot of time manually making content for them to their needs. Transitioning into grad school, started really struggling with contrast, the size of the text, like all of that really started to create barriers for me and the amount of reading that I had to do. So really seeing the need there for myself as well. I always say that we develop digital accessibility tools for students with disabilities and neurodiverse learners to give them equitable access to online education, making sure that they have the tools that they need to succeed anywhere across the web. So you sign up for your account, you start with the free trial. We don't ask for payment information up front. I think a lot of platforms do that to sort of loop you in, but really wanting you to genuinely try out the plugin itself. You take a learning questionnaire because we know it's not one size fits all. So you get to see all the text options that we have, the color contrast, the font. We have a dyslexic friendly font, things that we know are going to enhance your experience, as well as text to speech, bionic reading, which bolds the first half of every word. It's proven to increase reading speed. And you have all of that in this suite. And so we do that questionnaire to set you up with the default profile, whatever works best for you. And then you have that anywhere across the web.
Welcome to Mission Control. At Peralta Design, we launch brands. But for now, let's launch right into this episode.
3, 2, 1, 0, and
I'm thrilled to have, this sparkling, bright young person here that's going to take over the world. She is named Kia Huggan, the founder of Webquity.
Hello.
Welcome. I'm just blown away with your resume. I'm looking at all your accolades, recent UConn grad.
Yes.
Harvard, Yale awards here for startups. So I can't wait to get all into that and learn more about your startup. And of course, we've got Jorge here with us.
Yeah, Basa Mufasa. What's going on, everyone?
And Kevin, the man with more than one sound, I hope, today.
Plenty of sounds. There's this one.
Okay. That one's scary.
That's a solid, Saturday morning, that's a Power Rangers sound effect.
Oh man, well, let's have some fun. But first of all, let's talk about you really love somebody when you send them reels at all times of the night that you find interesting. And I've been sending you guys reels of people on the Vision Pro. There was one of a person driving the Cybertruck with no hands while on the Vision Pro, and I was just like, we're doomed. Because this is just like, what's going on? What is the deal?
They did say it wasn't self-driving.
I just can't even believe that this is where we've gotten to as a society.
Yeah.
Maybe I can. You really should have seen this coming. You look at WALL-E and it looks more and more like that was a documentary than
true foreshadowing there.
Foreshadowing. There's people who just want that future, and here we are. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised, and it's kind of shocking to me just the adoption rate. I would love to know what the statistics are going to be for Apple, whether or not this is going to be a success for them, because it seems like they would have priced out almost every one of the core audience. And even more fascinating to me is just from anecdotal evidence,
right,
I feel like the Vision Pro has actually spurred the sales of more Quest 3s.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. As soon as I got the PS4, the 5 came out. I finally got the Quest 3 and Vision Pro comes out.
Right.
So I'm right on the cusp. But my younger brother Chris reached out to me and said, what sold him was a commercial of a guy on a commercial, domestic flight with the Vision Pro watching a cinema theater size screen, for himself, watched on the plane. And he's like, that's the reason I'm getting it.
Is he getting it?
He's getting it.
We're going to need to have Chris record a review for us.
Yeah, because Chris he's an Apple guy and tech guy. He did well in the NFT space, so he may have a few ducats laying around that he's going to throw at the Vision Pro. And he said, "Are you guys getting one for the office?" And I was like, "At 4K, no, not right."
We're not talking about the resolution either.
Yeah, exactly. Not right off the bat, I'm dropping 4 Gs on something, but I am getting the Quest 3, so I'm excited. It should be coming in this week.
The biggest thing for me is outside of the the actually, the hand tracking is, next level on the Vision Pro, and all the minute details that you can do, and also the eye tracking. It removes the need for a cursor, right? There's no controller. Like your eyes literally become wherever you're looking is what you're interacting with.
But it's AR, so you're seeing through it,
right,
and you can see. That's why people are walking and driving. So it's enhancing.
Right. The
your
fidelity
reality
is unbelievable in comparison to everything else. But for me, it's interesting that the Quest 3 seems very similar. And that was the whole point of the Quest 3, is that they wanted to make something that was more AR than VR. It seems like the whole industry is going in this direction, and that it totally encasing you in the VR world without giving you the window to the outside world seemed to be like limiting, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Being able to combine the two things.
Yeah, it's like a hybrid approach, or maybe it has to do with keeping the device on longer, if you can see while you have it.
Apparently it's heavy. And, that your people are going to wear this thing for, 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever the full battery life is. Plus you've got to hook in the battery pack and then keep the battery pack on you somewhere. Yeah. It's another added
It looks very primitive, even though it's like so advanced. When I see the person walking and he's got the long cord and he's got the big headset, and you're saying there's a battery, it just seems like this is only going to get like streamlined.
Yeah, you could tell this is very early adopter. Yeah. Think about the original iPhone 3GS versus where we are now. It's night and day. You know what I mean? So as it evolves, it's gonna get sleeker and
I'm old, so the original like iPod.
Yeah.
And then, you get the little shuffles, like how did they take that, condense it?
iPod still had mechanical drive.
Yeah, and it had like a click wheel.
I loved that. There's something about like and it's funny, we'll talk about analog versus digital. There's something about analog, that touch, the click wheel was so brilliant to me. It was something that anybody could understand. And it was amazing that you could have, and it was new at the time, right? Everybody still had binders of CDs. So to say, hey, instead of that that big old binder, you can have all of that right here in your pocket. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, back then guys were dropping big time loot on putting like a hard drive in their car.
Yeah.
That could hold 1,000 MP3s or whatever.
You either had a 6 CD changer in the back, like I did.
Yeah.
Or you could do a hard drive with your MP3
But that was
player.
a big build, to do that versus just like CarPlay and it's your phone and you've got all these gigs on there. Crazy. But what do we think? What are the early projections on it or applications besides like I've seen that you can do like desktop applications on it, or you can watch movies, but what other practical applications do you see for the Vision Pro?
I mean, I just saw a story about a guy who was gonna buy a $5,000 TV, like a 75-inch, QLED, top of the line, everything. And he was like, wait a second, I can actually save $1,500 by getting the Vision Pro, and then I can have as big of a TV as I want. It can be literally my whole room. And then he decided, well, I could have a 75-inch TV here, a 45-inch TV here, a 55-inch. You can set up multiple displays all at the same time. So for him, that was the future of like watching all the sports that he.
But it's himself. He can't like gather the family
you
around.
You get a 75-inch TV so you can have people over to watch it. Not like, I'm gonna get a TV so I can sit there in front of it by myself.
Right. I guess if you're a single guy with no kids, the value is like, all right, who am I buying it for?
That's me, and I still would not.
It's like Ready Player One, like just.
Well, that also brings a question. I think about that all the time. Recently,
my point is like your world doesn't look as good as it does in the lenses, so you just keep those on.
Right, and that's that. The whole part of this further immersion to me is part of the thing that I think that movie, that book poses on society, where eventually the technology is going to get there. Even from the first primitive headsets that we were wearing, people forget that we had VR back in the 90s. It was super primitive in comparison. So eventually we're going to get to the point, I think, where the fidelity is going to be really close, where it's going to be tough to discern the difference. So what outside of cost, you know what I mean? There's going to be a whole segment of the population, to me, is not going to want to come out of that VR shell. They're gonna, become far too enamored with it. You know what I mean?
Ready Player One.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Anyway, when we come back after these words, we're going to learn more about Kia Huggan and her company, Webquity.
If you've got an innovation that you want to bring to the world, the first step is making sure you've got a great domain name. Visit shop.spacehost.pro to grab your domain name today and begin your new venture and your new business. Shop.spacehost.pro.
It says here you are an engineer, an educator, and that you embarked on an inspiring journey amid the COVID-19 pandemic sudden shift to online education. So I can't wait to hear about this and your startup, Webquity.
Yeah, so with that story, I feel like there's so many parts that have come together to bring me to where I am today. I think starting all the way back at the beginning that informs this journey is my parents. So starting with them coming to America from Jamaica, living in an attic above my grandparents' Jamaican restaurant in New York, all being very hard workers, really wanting better for us. And then at the time, I was raised predominantly in Georgia, I'd say, so from the South. And the schools in the South, not that great in particular, really low resource schools and not really having a lot of opportunities. But I think my parents having that drive, I think a typical like immigrant stereotype that you become an engineer, lawyer, doctor, those are the three options. My mom really started gearing me towards engineering around that time. And that looked like when you're forced to do like your middle school science fair. You have to participate. My mom went and bought me a robotics kit and said, this is what you're doing. Figure it out. I think she had met one engineer at the time, didn't know what that meant really, and just...
Do you remember how old you were when you got that robotics kit?
was 12.
Okay.
Yeah. So pretty young. And she had me sit with this engineer who truly put together most of the kit. But I was able to learn through that process. And I think that's when the transition happened from seeing robots as this cool, like sci-fi thing to a potential to be able to help people. So the project in itself, the robot, I named him Roger. The idea was that robots could help save people in natural disasters. And I was like, this matters. This is really cool. And all my friends thought it was cool as well, which I think was probably the biggest factor in why I kept going. But seeing that success in that space really motivated me to continue on. So continued down the engineering path from there, which is really interesting. And then moving to Connecticut, being here, I think a large culture shock in northwestern corner, middle of Connecticut, I was still able to pursue robotics and then driven even more so to access, accessibility, representation in my time transitioning into UConn. So those were all just really important factors towards everything that I wanted to do. But I think the transition for founding Webquity was really born within that collegiate space. And so...
And you went to stores?
Yes, at UConn stores. And during that time, I struggle to describe the transition between like doing a fun robot project and building Roger and all my friends liking him and then going to a college lecture and it was sitting through hours of things I arguably still may not understand studying engineering and figuring out what that meant for my future at that time. And I think being able to work with students was the largest shift for me. So teaching students, showing them how cool it was, the Rogers of the world, and introducing that to them continually motivated me. But now I wanted to study education. So really leaning into educational technology laid the foundation for what Webquity was to become after that.
And did you have siblings?
Yeah, and so I have a younger sibling, my sister, and then an older sibling, my brother. My brother definitely went the engineering route as well, and then my sister is studying engineering now at UConn. So a full circle.
Very consistent with the parents.
No, that's great.
Kudos, shout out to the parents. I mean, my parents are immigrants as well, and I mean, it's a common theme. I think they sacrifice so much, and then they have these expectations of us, and they drill it into you like, okay, you better do something with this. Like you don't want to, and you get that feeling like you don't want to squander their sacrifice.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's my hesitation around like when I started becoming interested in education, like my mom said to me, there's no way you get an engineering degree and then become a teacher. And she didn't respect them in the same way, right, just in terms of life outcome and the way that she saw it. So definitely.
Do you find that same thing carries through not just with your mom, but with other people in like the public at large, if there's some sort of societal, I don't know, like barrier or kind of like designation that you get put into?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. And especially with, I think, the stigma around like being an educator, and you'll hear things like those who can't do teach and things of that
from
sort.
School of Rock.
Yeah.
And those that can't teach Jim.
Yeah.
My thing is teachers and educators create engineers. So
Yeah.
Exactly. And, and we highly respect teachers around these parts, mom, dad, teachers, Jorge, and my wife's, Bridgeport educator for many, many years. My daughter's a teacher in New York. So we're big on it. So we think highly of them and deeply, highly esteemed, as far as like our society, I think, unfortunately values, guys that can shoot a basketball through a hoop a little bit more than those that are in the trenches with our youth. But it's a combination. I mean, I think, what you're sharing about your parents, it's the parents and the teachers, pushing our kids forward. And it's exciting to hear that your other siblings also are going to follow. Do they have roles in the startup?
They give me advice, I'd say. They're not fully immersed, but they're interested in always sort of asking questions, which I find a lot now, especially being younger in the space and doing entrepreneurship. A lot of questions around how to get start a business, what to do with ideas, has been really interesting as well.
Awesome. And you found out about us through Oni, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
tell us a little bit about that relationship with CT Next.
yeah, so I had been involved in CT Next through my time at UConn. I went back for my master's in entrepreneurship, which is a program within the engineering school, which is a really great opportunity within that program. And so CT Next was a huge supporter. I remember in my cohort always presenting to them, getting feedback, learning about the opportunities. And I was participating in the Startup Yale. So every year Yale has their entrepreneurial competitions, prizes. I ended up winning this past year, which was co-sponsored by CT Next. And so after that funding really launched us forward, and being able to discover brands like yours and being able to really just get in network with the larger amount of people had been really great out of that.
So give us the 30-second elevator pitch for Webquity.
Oh, wow. Okay. Putting me on the spot. I always say that we develop digital accessibility tools for students with disabilities and neurodiverse learners to give them equitable access to online education, making sure that they have the tools that they need to succeed anywhere across the web, pretty much.
Wow. Who wouldn't support that? You nailed it.
And is that a domestic endeavor? Is that international? Is there is that multi-language? What's the scope of that?
Right now, we're limited to English, so one language. Definitely wanting to expand out and implementing tools for translation is a really great, really great option for us as well. And so internationally, in the sense that it's on the internet, anyone could download it, but definitely serving domestically. And we're starting to work with schools in Connecticut as well.
Incredible. What is this thing about double vision? And you had your own experience with it. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's interesting because, well, one, I think everyone transitioned online during COVID-19 and seeing a lot of issues
remote learning and things like that.
Yeah.
And for many people, they think it was like a lost year, or for students, unfortunately, that weren't. The younger ones, I think, really kind of were in front of the screen and came back, and they fell behind on social learning and a lot of things.
Yeah, and at the time I was working within education. I was working for Black Girls Code, and we noticed a lot of issues that the students were having, and so I had to spend a lot of time manually making content for them to their needs. And then personally myself, like experiencing double vision, I think maybe I'd gotten away with it studying engineering, not having to read like large papers and things, but transitioning into grad school started really struggling with double vision, like making out like the difference between like a 6, 8, and a 9 and a 3, couldn't tell you. Probably not. It'd take like a lot of focus to figure that out.
Just from reading books or reading online, or both? Reading
online, I think particularly on the screen.
Screens,
the contrast, the size of the text, like all of that really started to create barriers for me, and the amount of reading that I had to do. So really seeing the need there for myself as well.
So it's kind of born out of, necessity, but also your own personal experience. And then was the thought that if I'm struggling with this, there are people elsewhere and maybe I can create something?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. So on one end, what you're saying, like the need for the access, making sure that students like myself had the tools that they need. And I think also out of laziness. So at my job, having to put in all the extra hours to accommodate the students, which we had to do, really looking how can we automate that, make it faster, more efficient, all of the technology terms as well.
So kind of walk us through the platform in the process. So
yeah, I'd love to know more about, let's say I was a school or a program that wanted to get involved with a Webquity. What does that look like? How do they How does that relationship start? And then what is that onboarding process like?
Yeah, so we just started our first official school partnership this week. So using that as an example, we're working with Connecticut River Academy. And so being able to bring our tools to their students. So the extension's available on Google Chrome. A ton of schools use Chromebooks. That motivated the decision of why it's hosted on that platform. And it looks like being able to provide those tools to students throughout their own task and what they're working through. And so through contacting us, and we reach out through LinkedIn, social media, we've had a ton of educators that are interested, and then really being able to meet their needs of would this look for your students throughout the day. Really seamless integration we've seen so far.
So what is that? So it's a Chrome extension. So what does it look like? Okay, I go in, I install it. It's a paid extension, or I need a license key, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's a paid extension for schools. We do everything on the back end to take that lift off for them. As an individual user, you sign up for your account. You start with the free trial. We don't ask for payment information up front. I think a lot of platforms do that to sort of loop you in. But really wanting you to genuinely try out the plugin itself, you take a learning questionnaire because we know it's not one size fits all. So you get to see all the text options that we have, the color contrast, the font. We have a dyslexic-friendly font, things that we know are going to enhance your experience, as well as text-to-speech, bionic reading, which bolds the first half of every word. It's proven to increase reading speed. And you have all of that in this suite. And so we do that questionnaire to set you up with the default profile, whatever works best for you. And then you have that anywhere across the web.
Okay. Do you have any, it sounds like there's a lot of overlap with what we see on the web development front with ADA compliance. So is there also, do any of those standards like WCAG or any of those standards fall in line with what your tool does or that suite?
Yep. So we're definitely motivated by the guidelines and making sure that we're doing what we can to make sure that students have the tools to adapt websites to those needs. It's interesting because within the space, Webquity doesn't exist alone in the web accessibility space. A lot of our competitors, their value proposition is if your website's not up to date, like there's your consequences for that. Like people need to be able to use your website, and they focus on website hosts. And in our case, we really focus on the user, the student, whoever is navigating the internet, and what do you need across these sites. Definitely motivated by it, but I think our value proposition is more person focused versus business interest focused.
Okay. And this is more of a, how does this work license-wise? Does this work, is this annual? Is this monthly? If you're an organization that wanted to get onboarded, what does that look like?
Yeah, so we do our intake process. We usually consult just pretty individually towards their needs, what it looks like a typical school year across 9 months. Do you want it just for particular students for a certain amount of time or certain classes that they're in at the collegiate level? So we've really consulted just one-to-one and really adaptive to those needs.
Okay, great. So it's all kind of like the sliding scale based on what, that individual school or organization needs.
Yes.
Take us through the early stages, because I'm assuming this. If you went back to get your master's in entrepreneurship, they're trying to at least prepare you for what it's like to start a business. But what were some of the challenges you had early in that entrepreneur journey?
Yeah, I think shifting from the mindset from just doing projects for fun and just because I liked it and because it could help people to now having a business idea was a transition that was interesting. So what does that look like scale-wise? How do I offer it? What is the business structure and how to pitch that to people and get investment? It was very tough to answer all those questions, but I think really important that I had to do that up front. And getting a lot of the no's or discouragement or still to this day, like people will say, like, I don't think that's a good idea. Why are you doing this? So being able to intake that feedback, I think especially there's a vulnerability of having a new idea and like keeping it hush hush and not wanting a lot of feedback. So really being able to get hit with that up front in the program.
Did you find yourself getting people to sign NDAs early on when you were sharing the idea?
No, I think it's probably a benefit, or it could be to my disadvantage.
It was just kind of naive.
Yeah.
You were just kind of telling people about it, but at risking them stealing it or...
Yeah, and that was a lot of the feedback that I got up front as well. Like when I would pitch in my classes, the judges who were professionals that would come in would be like, you need to do this as soon as possible, like today.
Protect it, because they know there's some bad characters out there that could take your idea or develop it quicker.
Yes.
Or, you've done the hard work, you've identified the need, but maybe they could deploy it faster than you can or so forth. So it sounds like some of these judges were offering some mentorship in a way.
Yes, and I think it's something that I had to learn as well, because I think at first it was like very shocking to hear like, oh, like that's a bad idea, like don't do that, like why are you doing it this way? Or even I've had like questions at the end of pitch competitions, like why should I care? Like I don't have those disabilities, why do I care? And at the first, like really, my initial reaction is like, why are you asking me like why you should care about other people? Like I don't know, like how do I answer this question? But then really realizing that
you're like, what? You want to help people?
Yeah, no.
Next, just say poor people.
And it's like taking a step back and realizing they're looking at how do you pitch this to large audiences? How do you brand it to reach people?
Right. They're like saying, they're always thinking like if it's too niche, and the margins are too small, it's not worth my time, kind of like the Mr. Wonderful, Shark Tank approach. There's always one of those judges that goes right for the juggler and wants to, it's okay, that sounds all kumbaya, but like how are you going to make money? Like it always comes down to that, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I've had really great mentors, and just another example of that like shift that I had to make in my mind, for example, around profit, since you brought that up, is one of my mentors asked me, and they were like, okay, why do you want to work with schools and institutions instead of individual people? Right. And my answer was that students shouldn't be burdened with the monetary responsibility to have tools that they already need, and these schools have an obligation. And my mentor looked at me, and he was like, no, it's because you can make more money from institutions.
Right, because you're selling a bulk license versus, individual. And you've probably learned by now if you take on investors, then you've got to give up some equity in your company. Have you experienced that yet?
I'm avoiding it intentionally at this time. We've had a lot of people reach out and who are interested and who want equity, which I think is reassuring in the sense that people believe in it, essentially. Right. They're willing to invest. Good. Yeah, and so that's been a really good sign. But then on the flip side of that, like you said, the obligations, the strings attached to it, if we don't need the money in that capacity, trying to avoid that, at least for now, as we're building up. And so being fortunate to really leverage non-dilutive funding up to this point has been successful this far, but it's definitely on the table.
Yes, and so what has been your source of funding? Has it been through grants or winning these competitions?
Yep. So through pitch competitions, really being able to leverage like the larger pitch competitions. I definitely started small, like with $100, $1,000, and continuing and building up from there has been really significant. We were awarded one grant from UConn, so going through that application process, learning how to apply for grants has been really helpful. And then other opportunities like accelerators, incubators, a lot of time dedicated to getting access to that funding.
Yeah, there's so many. We should be grateful being in this state that there are a lot of programs, and we're tapped into a number of them. But Reset right now is accepting applications for their latest cohort, and they're out of Hartford, but there are some all around the state. M&T Bank's behind the one at UB. There's so many. So it's good to know that we're encouraging this. And just leveraging your background, kind of bringing your superpowers into this to help others is phenomenal. I got to ask, though, are you doing something, because you got the Jamaican parents, are they holding you down, or are they kind of like you got to go out and get a job and then build your company on the side? What's your strategy right now?
Yeah, and so after I'd graduated from Harvard, I accepted a product manager role. I was like, I need to have a salary. I'll work on this. But to my surprise, and I worked from there for a couple of months, but to my surprise, my parents were like, why not give it a shot? Like, why not give it this full, like, one go? We'll see where it happens. Like, what better time? You don't have, like, children or a husband. Like, why not do it right now? And so they're really supportive, and I think part of that is from the work that they put in. They're like, you can do what we couldn't do. And they expressed like, I didn't even have hobbies or things like free time wasn't a concept for them. So they're like, go ahead and do it. They still definitely check in like daily. They're like, so what are you doing? Like, to make sure that I'm not.
You got to put the work in. They want to make sure you're putting the work in. But I agree with them. I mean, I think each generation, the goal is for that next generation to do better. And your mom and dad are right. They're saying to you, hey, you don't have these I wouldn't say roadblocks, but things that could weigh you down or responsibilities that you have to tend to so that you can focus. So it is a blessing to have them think of it that way and trust you. A lot of them, I mean, because imagine we're trying to learn how this all works. Your parents are probably like listening to you explain how this works, and they at some point they just got to trust that you're building something great as you continue to get great feedback. So Are there any organizations now that are customers or clients that you can talk about?
Yeah, and so with Connecticut River Academy, really excited about that partnership that started this week, actually.
Wow.
So being able to work
You
with...
can get some claps maybe, or Jamaican air horn.
On par. But yeah, with Connecticut River Academy, really excited to work with their students, get feedback from their students on the product, how it works for them. Also giving them insight into being part of the startup life is pretty cool. So they're able to do the user experience testing and give me their feedback and see what we do with that. So using it as a learning experience as well, kind of selfishly because I love teaching and working with students. So a win-win there.
Yeah, and what parts of the business are you looking forward to firing yourself from? Like as you grow, who are some of the first folks that you might hire?
Yeah, so recently brought on a new COO who handles all of marketing. Like being in office today with you all has been really inspiring as well, because I think there needed to come a point where Webquity and my personal brand had to take a separation. So Webquity can stand on its own and have its brand guidelines.
That wasn't easy to get Ramon to do, by the way.
Yeah.
That was a lot of years of blood, sweat, and tears to get him to let that go. So if you're already at that point, kudos to you.
You're way ahead of the game.
You know, I dream of Webquity existing, and you don't even know that like I'm the founder of it or anything, and just as on its own. So having all the marketing handled has been a relief, and getting the reminders of we need to be consistent with colors. Like before those considerations, or like even a brand, the logo was like made on Canva in 5 minutes, and like our post would be all types of different colors. So really having someone come in and hone in on that has been really, really helpful, and I think just for the brand as a whole has really advanced. She reminded me to make sure I take pictures before I leave here today.
Absolutely.
To help her out.
Absolutely. And the glasses and the logo, is that kind of a breadcrumb trail to you having double vision, or
yeah.
Explain that a little bit.
So the first product, the extension itself, we call it digital glasses.
Okay.
And so really looking at it as like your written prescription, but on the web, not needing physical glasses was the idea behind that. And then utilizing it in the logo was a decision that we went back and forth on, because we hope to have more products that we're developing right now. We're really looking at it as like the pathway into the future, like you're looking into clear, better, all of those things.
Awesome. So kind of give us an idea of your target audience and how they might learn more, and how they can find you. Maybe share some of your social handles. I'm sure your marketing person will be happy.
Yes, definitely ran through it with me. But with our target audience, we are looking to help people who want to read faster, comprehend better. If you have any trouble with completing your essays or reading your notes online, we have tools to help you. We want your feedback and for you to try that out. And you can do that through our website. It's webquityed.com, or at Webquity on LinkedIn, Instagram, always, whatever way is easiest for you to connect with us. We're everywhere and willing to connect with you all. On TikTok as well, starting to do some demos and personas so you can see who's using the product. So yeah, Webquity across all platforms.
Excellent. And what's next for Webquity?
So we're going to continue our school partnerships, hoping to acquire more. We've had some educators reach out, and then continue just serving people across the web, like wanting to know people's thoughts, opinions, really adaptive in the process. And we have a new product coming out at the end of Q1. So really happy to launch the beta version of that as well.
Awesome. Exciting. A quick aside is, did you guys have a development team in-house?
No. So we recently brought up one developer that's now a part of the team officially, but up until this point, I've just managed contracted teams for our needs so far.
Congratulations. I mean, that's a big effort in and of itself. So that's exciting. Bringing a software as a service to market is something that, we've seen so many people attempt to do. And the core of it is having a good idea. So, all the kudos to you.
No, thank you so much. And I think it's really interesting to see the pathway. I don't feel like there's a lot of people in the intermediate stage of figuring businesses out. It seems like it's either people who have a really good idea or they have $1 million investment. And so glad to be in the middle and have the platform to share this story as well.
Well, you're super inspiring. I mean, we started out the segment talking about, Vision Pro and how we're doomed. But, speaking with someone like you just coming out of school with such a great idea is really inspiring and refreshing to know that the future's in good hands. I'd like you to send off our listeners that may be interested in starting a business with just a few words of wisdom as an entrepreneur, maybe some motivation that you might give someone that's considering an idea and maybe just afraid to launch.
Yeah, no, I think this is really super relevant. Yesterday, actually, my dad and one of my friends both came to me with business ideas, and they were like, we should do this together. And I think that togetherness is really hesitance on their end, because it's like a tax business and like a cupcake shop, like things I'm not interested in, but they are. And I think that hesitance reflects what a lot of people feel with starting a business, like they need someone that they feel like knows the way or knows the path forward. So my advice would be to just start. You'll figure it out along the way. I think that the steps sort of line themselves out as long as you have a mission and you figure it out. So definitely my best advice is just to start for one, and then to know that there's so many pathways to achieve whatever it is. And I've got questions about like, what if the extension isn't no one buys it, like it's not successful. But when you have a mission or a passion, just knowing that there's so many pathways to get there is what keeps me going. So maybe your first attempt does fail. Maybe digital glasses doesn't take off. There's another way to reach the end goal. So just keeping that in mind.
Awesome. And I predict success for you, and I wish you all the best. So thanks for coming on our show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to this episode of Mission Control. Until next time, this is your host, Ramon Peralta, with Peralta Design, and we launch brands.